A need for a bit of transition at West Bloomfield Town Hall from one administration to the next. Joining us for more insight on making that transition and where the township goes from here are its two other elected full-time officials, West Bloomfield Township Clerk Debbie Binder and West Bloomfield Township Treasurer Teri Weingarden. Thank you both for being with us.
Good morning, Tyler.
Oh, good morning.
Yeah, glad to have you both on with us as it's an interesting time in West Bloomfield Township's history, a resignation from the supervisor and an appointment just recently of Jonathan Warshay as Township Supervisor. Teri, I want to begin with you as someone that had a lot to say at the appointment of Jonathan Warshay about what qualifies him for that position. What do you believe makes him an excellent successor for the supervisor position?
So there's a lot of reasons, and we had a lot of people speaking on Jonathan's behalf at the meeting. And, he has deep integrity. He's very intelligent. He's kind. He's very even-keeled. But for me, the main thing actually was the voters. So this was a very unprecedented situation for us in West Bloomfield. And I felt that if I and my other board members were choosing somebody, we should select somebody that the voters would select. So Jonathan ran back in, I believe it was 2016 for supervisor. And at that time, thank you, Debbie, 2012 for supervisor. And at that time, we had an incumbent. And then we had Jonathan running. And then we had one person. Sometimes people just kind of are put in the race but never run just to kind of mess with the numbers. Jonathan only lost by 215 votes. And that third candidate, whose name I don't even remember, and never ran a campaign, got about 900. And that's pretty normal when you have people that are known and not known. So Jonathan actually would have won the election had that third person not been in that race. And then Jonathan has been elected trustee time after time by the voters of West Bloomfield. So for me, I wanted to make sure we were picking somebody the voters would have picked, because I think that's really important that the voters have a voice. First of all, they elect us to make these decisions, but really we wanted to make sure it wasn't an unknown, but it was somebody that, the voters would respect as much as we did. So for me, that was very paramount in my decision making.
And Teri, that's a really good point, because when there is a resignation from the township supervisor, a statute says that the township board is the one that's making a decision on appointing a successor for that position. So to go to you, Clerk Binder, I'd imagine from a leader's standpoint, as you're making a very tough decision under tough circumstances, you and the other, at that point in time, 5 members of the township board, that stability would play a big factor in who succeeds as supervisor.
Absolutely. And I think that Teri's point about that the people had already spoken many times about Jonathan, in addition to when he ran for supervisor and lost by a small amount, he was selected 3 times by the voters as their trustee. So the voters have their faith in him. And I think that's a really important and excellent point that the treasurer has made. I think in addition, we have had 8 years of working with Jonathan to know who he is, to know how he operates, and to understand his integrity. So, statute dictates that the board should select a person in the event of a vacancy, but normally it is selected by the people. So I think the responsibility of taking who the people would have selected into account was key. But in this case, providing that continuity, as I had mentioned during the meeting, Jonathan is uniquely qualified. He has served for 8 years as a trustee. He does have the knowledge of the role, and he has been an exemplary trustee who has come to every meeting prepared and ready, understanding the issues, having asked the questions ahead of time, and engaged. And not every board member and any board comes prepared like that. So I think when we looked at Jonathan's character, we looked at his background, his experience, his education, that he's a lawyer. I believe he has a business degree as well. But knowing what he brought to the table in addition to the experience that he brought with him to the table, it was really an easy choice for me. He was, as I said, uniquely qualified. We were comfortable when we're tasked with it. It is, like you said, it's a big responsibility to have to make that choice. And at this point, that choice is for 2 years. Now, again, it's not for the entire term, In 2 years, the voters will get to choose who they select as their replacement, and hopefully Jonathan will do a good job in that role. But I have every belief that he will, because to me, he was proven, and we have seen what he is like as a human, what he is like as a leader, and what he is like as as a board member. So I think it was a great choice to bring him on as supervisor. And, is there a learning curve? I think for everybody there is that takes on any role. But I know that Teri and I are looking forward to the collaborative nature of his leadership. We know that the three of us will work together, very closely, and it should be, of benefit to the residents of West Bloomfield. Because I know Jonathan as a person. I know his commitment to our community, and I've worked with Teri and known Teri for many years. I know Teri's commitment to this community and to our residents, and I believe that mine is known as well. So I think it'll be three really strong people working together to make sure that West Bloomfield is in the best position moving forward.
West Bloomfield Township Clerk Debbie Binder's with us, as well as West Bloomfield Township Treasurer Teri Weingarden, getting their reaction to the big news in West Bloomfield Township. A new Township Supervisor has taken office, Jonathan Warshay, after being appointed by the West Bloomfield Township Board at a recent special meeting, addressing the resignation of Steve Kaplan and, of course, their will appointing a new supervisor under statute in the state of Michigan. I want to go back to you, Teri Weingarden, Township Treasurer, as we think about that learning curve Debbie talked about, getting a new leader in place. But having a leader in place in that position is really important. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, there are 3 full-time elected officials at Town Hall that are kind of the chief department leads across the board for all the day-to-day business. And I'd imagine following a resignation, a vacation of the office, that burden moving down the chain can maybe make things a little bit more hectic. Not necessarily delayed or take away from the day-to-day business, but I'd imagine in this scenario that having a supervisor in place is immediately helpful for the entire business of the township.
That's correct. You need to have continuity and leadership, and it's so important. And so we felt that as soon as possible, we really needed to select the new supervisor. First of all, the department heads have known that Steve Kaplan was going to leave for a few weeks. And then the resignation hadn't come yet. So there was some concern. They didn't know what was going on. And so the residents were calling. They didn't know what was going on. So I think you just want to have that continuity and leadership. And Debbie Binder, our clerk, and I had worked very hard for many months to get a AAA bond rating for the township. And part of what S&P looks at is the strength of the community and the continuity of leadership. So that is a big deal. So we certainly didn't want to risk losing that high bond rating. It allows the township to borrow at a much lower interest rate. So the Parks and Rec bonds, we actually got 12 bids because we were AAA, and they got a much better borrowing rate, which means that the money of our residents will go further. So that's very important too. But luckily, in the case of Jonathan, he already has worked with the department head for years at the township board level. Like Debbie mentioned, he prepares for the meetings. So what does that mean? So you get this packet, and there's going to be things in it you don't know anything about, right? That's the point. They're coming to the board. So you call the department heads and you find out more about it, and you ask good questions and you do research. And then when you come to the meeting, you have in mind how you think you're going to vote. Then you listen to everything that's brought to you at the board table, and then you make a decision. Well, because Jonathan was so prepared, he often would call the department heads to get insight into the items on the agenda. So he has a very good rapport. He also has approved a budget every year, so he understands the budget. And the supervisor is in charge of the budget. So I think in this case, it'll be a pretty smooth transition. Yes, there's things to learn about being supervisor, and he'll have to get connected to that, but he'll have a lot of support from the township department heads, his executive assistant, and all of us.
Teri Weingarden with us, the West Bloomfield Township Treasurer, alongside the West Bloomfield Township Clerk Debbie Binder. As a new supervisor has taken office, West Bloomfield Township Trustee Jonathan Warshay appointed and accepting that position recently at a Township Board special meeting addressing the vacancy of the supervisor position. But Debbie Binder, with that being the case, with Mr. Warshay taking over as supervisor, he did also have to vacate his position as a West Bloomfield Township trustee. Again, that goes back to statute now, and the Township Board has some other big decisions upcoming. What is the statutory process going forward in terms of filling the trustee position and bringing that board back to 7 people?
So filling the trustee position is very similar to how we had to fill the supervisor's position. It is set forth in statute. It does guide what we have to do as a board, and it mandates the board to make that selection of who will fill a vacancy once we have an official, notice of a vacancy. So in terms of the process, it really outlines it outlines that the board makes the selection. Now, we are very fortunate. We have had at least a dozen people in the community that have, expressed interest in the job. Many even if it were to become available. And what was, heartening to me was that everybody that came forward is a visible, dedicated member of this community. There's no one that came forward and just decided, oh, you know what, I like that job. They were all people that were known to us and people who have the best interest of West Bloomfield at heart. So the board will follow the statutory guidelines that mandate us to make a choice, and people have expressed interest. And so we will see at the meeting. I am going to put it on for January 13th. Okay. I think we all need a little bit of time now. It's a lot of change in a short period of time. And we will address, filling that vacancy on the board with somebody that we believe is the right choice at the right time. So, stay tuned. That will come, but the board will follow the statutory outlines to make that selection.
In the meantime, wbtownship.org for more updates and information from West Bloomfield Township, and you can watch all of their Township Board meetings right here on Civic Center TV and on our website on civiccentertv.com. Clerk Binder, Treasurer Weingarden, thank you both so much for your time today. I know we got to let you get going and continue your busy day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Have a great day, and thanks for always making sure everyone knows things they need to know in West Bloomfield.